welcome to another episode of Work 2.0, the podcast. Again, I'm your host, Rachel Wells, and I'm excited to be back on this weekly briefing where we discuss AI, the future of work, money, and careers. Today, I'm delighted to have with me another guest who I've interviewed before, just like last week. This lady is phenomenal. She's DeVry University's first female president in its 90-plus year history. She's a trailblazer when it comes to the world of developing the workforce, when it comes to technology. I've interviewed her for my Forbes column, I think it was last year, and I'm happy to invite her back. Thank you so much for graciously accepting the invitation, Elise. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Rachel. Thank you so much for inviting me back. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I have to say, what a great idea for a podcast, because Work 2.0 is one of my favorite topics and what I actually live and breathe daily. So I'm thrilled to be here and honored to be one of your guests. Thank you.
Awesome. You're welcome. You're welcome. So obviously, I did spill the beans a bit about your background. I was a bit excited, so I had to. But honestly, for those of us, or for those of the audience who don't know who you are, you've made history as DeVry's first female president. Am I right? So, but obviously, even like looking at the news and looking at tech leadership and even education leadership, it's very much male dominant. Even now, we're making some small progress, but it's still very much male dominant. So what do you think women are up against when it comes to breaking into tech spaces and educational spaces? And how did you play the game a bit differently in your career?
That's a great question to just jump right in, right? And by the way, thank you so much for the generous introduction, Rachel. Very kind of you. I think you're right. Barriers still exist for women, depending on the level and industry. Tech, it's pretty prominent in tech. And while so much has changed in a good way, I empathize when I hear or even see executive spaces looking to legacy. I like to use the term to legacy, which frankly is shaped by decades of norms that didn't have many women in roles like mine, in C-suite roles or even leadership hierarchies. So, there's visible stuff that women are up against. One, I think, I'm seeing more and more that access to capital is one thing that women are up against. So if someone wants to start up their own business, it's a bit more challenging. Representations in certain industries. We talked about technology. That's absolutely one of the challenges for women who want to break into tech. They don't see many people who look like them, and so it can be a bit discouraging. But also, there's so much more from a subtle force perspective. One is the assumptions that get made about your ambition as a woman, your boundaries you set, or your ability to sort of navigate being in a role of influence in decision making without being labeled, and I'm going to use air quotes here, difficult.
Yeah.
And I've been in rooms where my presence was novel. I was the only one. What I've learned is that you can't wait for those rooms to shift or change before you enter them. You just can't. You're waiting forever.
And it won't happen.
Exactly, it won't happen. So you have to walk in as you are. And I like to say that I walk in unshaken by any discomfort and awkwardness that I might feel. Because sometimes I talk about imposter syndrome a lot, and I actually wrote about it. It's more imposter syndrome than reality. And throughout my career, I made deliberate choices to remain confident, regardless of whether or not imposter syndrome sneaks its way in. And I've also made deliberate choices not to lead like someone else, but to lead like me. Because I think that's what's led to so much of my success. And I've got to be authentic. Otherwise, there's no point in being someone else, And I've learned to sort of reframe things.
You've dropped a lot of gems in that one answer. And one thing I wanted to really kind of zoom in on is when you mentioned about imposter syndrome, because I think that's something a lot of women are up against when it comes to career progression period. I read a stat that says that you have a man and a woman looking at, it was from a few years ago, I think you may have seen it as well. You have a man and a woman applying for the same job, and a woman will only apply if she meets like almost 100% of the specifications, but then a man will apply even if he only meets 50 to 70%. And I thought that's wild, because often that internal voice is like holding us back from a lot of opportunities, and we're kind of excluding ourselves. Not that the blame rests on us, but we do often exclude ourselves from opportunities where we have the opportunity to shine. And what you're saying is, in spite of that imposter syndrome, you made the deliberate decision to still show up, to kind of ignore that voice and still show up. And when those times when you made that decision, were there any times when the imposter syndrome was so bad that you found yourself stuttering or visibly nervous?
Oh, absolutely. Look, I'm going to be honest, because it is it is something that will exist no matter where you're at, what stage in your career. It's there, and I think it's both for men and women. I love that you brought up that job description statistic, because I read that too, and I'm like, that is so true.
Yeah.
I've looked at throughout my career, I've looked at job descriptions. I'm like, I don't qualify.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, okay, you might not check every box, but I talked about this in my commencement speech. Do you have the capacity to learn? Do you have the curiosity to learn?
Yeah.
Do you have the courage to just take a chance? Capacity, right? Courage, and curiosity. And so I say it to all the graduates. I'm like, I better live by that. And
yes.
So, it's but look, I think for me, I go back to the whole. I'm empathetic that this is not easy for everyone. That's why I'm also very, very passionate about investing in supporting women who may feel that imposter syndrome, whether it's breaking into tech, or we talk about AI education pathways, because I think they sort of go hand in hand, right?
Yes.
And Women in Tech is an initiative that I had started during COVID with my team, and that's really helped, but it's still not solving the entire problem that we face.
Yeah. Yeah, and just this wasn't actually planned as part of the question, so you don't mind me throwing you off here a bit, but when it comes to, you mentioned about venture capital and tech, we know that a lot of Silicon Valley is predominantly male. You see it all the time, the big tech firms, and when it comes to OpenAI and everything, a lot of it's predominantly male. Well, at least it looks that way. Those are the ones at the forefront, right? We don't know who's behind the scenes. But also, what's really scary is, even for myself as a founder, as an entrepreneur, and I'm seeing the stats and looking at 2% of total venture capital funding globally goes to women. 2%. And it's like there's no room to innovate, to explore. Like, even you can pitch so many times, like the founder of Canva, look how many times she got rejected before she was given a chance. And I couldn't help but think to myself, if she was a man, how sooner would she have gotten a yes? Thank God she was persistent enough. So I'm thinking that there's a larger thing at play here. Like, you can try and put yourself out there as much as possible, but then there are times when you are restricted, unfortunately, by circumstance with people who do not take you seriously. And I just want to ask you, what would your advice be to those women who are potentially startup founders or looking to launch a startup? What would you say to them right now?
If I were to go in and try, look, I would probably be bold enough to feel confident that my idea, whatever business I want to start, it's like, you ever watch Shark Tank, right? So when they're so confident and they believe in their product or what they're starting, and they know it's going to solve a problem, I would lead with what problem I'm trying to solve.
Right.
And you got to tug, regardless of who you are, you got to tug at the heartstrings. You've got to make people really see that, like, there's value in what you're saying and what you're about to do. And I think if you do that, and you really you show your conviction, you communicate your conviction, and I think part of it is also internal too, as a person.
Yes.
You never make the assumption that things are fixed. They are always variable, Rachel. But you have to start thinking and responding differently for the dynamics to shift around you.
Got it.
Do not hold out until things feel more comfortable. You may get more questions than someone else. But you're ready to answer them, Rachel. You're ready to answer them. Anybody that's got belief in their product or what they're offering, and they're looking for funding, they have enough conviction that they got to that point. Show it and get used to being uncomfortable, because that is when you start to really grow.
Amazing. Right, let's get to the next question. So
that was a good sidebar, though. That was a good sidebar. There's so many people that face that issue.
Yeah, for sure. I thank you so much for your answer there. That's amazing. So, obviously, when we think about leadership, there is this polished glam image of what it looks like to be a leader. You have your team getting dressed, there's the glam, there's the whole picture of being a leader and being in position, right? And you're poised, you're in control and everything. But what's the non-glamorous side of leadership that no one talks about?
Well, I can, I think this is a great question. I like to describe leadership as gloriously messy.
Wow.
I think we do a disservice, especially to women, by not telling the full truth. I've had chapters where I've doubted myself, where I said yes to too much. I mean, gosh, I feel that right now. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting on this board, or I'm doing this thing, or I've got this, after work commitment, or I'm traveling a ton in the month of August. Where there's an underestimation of the dogmatic side of leadership, and I can't stress that enough. But the biggest unspoken part, and what I can share in terms of my experience, is how lonely it can feel when you're ascending. Leadership,
Oh, wow.
especially as the president and CEO, it can isolate you. You're making decisions without imperfect information constantly. So you have to be comfortable with that. You're carrying burdens you can't always share. And if you're someone who doesn't just want to succeed or win, but wants to do right by people, it gets even harder.
Right. You're constantly stepping on people's toes. There's always someone disagreeing with you.
Yeah, and look, like as a leader, you don't get to phone it in. There's no such thing as I'll use the air quotes again, light day at the top. If something goes wrong, it lands on your desk or in your lap. But the most important part is a leader, in my philosophy. And if something goes right, the credit usually belongs to the team that you're leading, and rightfully so. That is where I like to give credit. So that's the deal, and part of the job, and it's one I accept gladly even, but it's not the glossy version, to your point, people imagine.
Yeah, for sure.
Emotional labor, there's a lot of emotional labor that goes into it, right? 1 hour you're delivering hard news in a private setting, and the next you're stepping on stage or on a podcast like this.
Right? And the next one you're at a red carpet event. That's a lot of emotional turmoil in one day.
Exactly. And I'll end. This is a really good question. I'm glad you brought it up because, as a leader, you're obviously working for an organization. For me, I work for DeVry, and my grounding force has always been our mission. We are here for the working adult, the first gen student, the career switcher, people who don't have time and need extra support. And we like to say, DeVry works for you. And we hear that this model and mindset made a difference. People from commencement, etc. And so that's my why behind the hard days. So you got to find your why at your organization. Why do you do what you do as a leader?
That's amazing. Because I was just about to jump into that follow-up question. So you must have known what I was going to say. I was going to say, how do you navigate that? That's good. So yeah, having a strong why is so powerful for sure. Like, when I was younger and before I was promoted to management, I always wanted to be a leader. And so when I landed my first promotion, when it actually happened, I was prepared for it internally, but I realized my brain wasn't syncing with what I had learned. And so when it was time, and my first day in management, I literally cried because I was overwhelmed. Like, this is too much, not too much, but it was more of imposter syndrome. I felt inadequate for the role. And that's when it hit me. This is real stuff. This is not just what you see on movies. There's a lot that goes behind the scenes that you've got. And there's times when like you said, there's no one around you to hold you up. There's no one around you to kind of bounce ideas with. Sometimes you're the only one who's authorized to make a final decision. What do you do, right? And I think it's really about giving yourself that grace and taking care of your well-being as well. Have you got any well-being hacks that you want to share on how you kind of cope during those times?
No, you're asking me in a really important season right now, which is marathon training season. I'm training for the Chicago Marathon. That is my outlet, running.
Wow.
It helps a lot. Like, it's funny, Rachel, my team knows when I run in the morning. My team knows when I run at lunch because I'm a totally different, I'm more, clear, probably, a little more focused on the conversation, not thinking about 800 different things because I kind of did that on the run. And so that's my outlet. I really do like to stay, active and make sure that I have a bit of an outlet for the stress. That's and I've cried too before, by the way. So I'm gonna normalize that for you.
Right. I know it's normal. That's good. Running is amazing. I actually did a half marathon when I think I was 18 or 17. And long distance running has always been a love of mine. Recently, I haven't had much time to do it, but I definitely need to get back into it because it's so freeing. It's like when you start running, it's like everything on your mind, it just feels like it's lifted. It's not that big of a deal anymore.
And there's power in being outside, breathing the fresh air,
Yes. For sure, for sure. So when it comes to AI, we know obviously it's definitely, we spoke about this in our last conversation, how it's poised to transform the workforce. And now we're seeing it in real time, which is exciting. Um, but when it comes to, like we said at the beginning, the leadership behind and even the people developing AI, the majority is still male dominant and still people who are not necessarily from diverse ethnic groups. So what do you think we can do from an organizational perspective if you're talking to someone who's working in HR or someone, a business leader? What do you think they can do or we can do to ensure that underrepresented voices, such as women, such as people of color, have a leading say in the development and the education and the regulations and the leadership and strategy behind AI?
Yeah, this is something that's been on my mind lately, just because of how quickly people are leveraging and scaling AI solutions across organizations. And I'll give you a short answer and then I'd like to zoom out. Look, we are going to do that by having more women and people of color in leadership naturally.
Right.
By making certain women understand what they naturally bring to the party and how it applies to the AI world. The nation and the nation's economy need women and people of color at this critical juncture. So I'll start with that. But I'm going to zoom out for a moment, because when I talk about AI and equity, or when we talk about that, we're not just talking about representation on leadership teams. We're talking about whether the future is being built for all of us. That's really the question, right?
Yes.
And essentially, we're talking about the risk of systems, of what I'd like to describe as a systems design problem. If the people shaping AI, from developers to policy architects to, in our case, curriculum designers, don't reflect the complexity and the diversity of our society, we will embed blind spots into the very infrastructure we are relying on to solve our biggest future challenges.
That's scary to think about.
Right. And what's even scarier, Rachel, is once those blind spots are codified in software, scaled by algorithms,
wow,
and integrated into institutions like, higher ed or whatever, they're much harder to unwind.
Oh, yeah, so, systemic.
Yeah, that's the real risk we're facing. And I don't think it's ever really been articulated or described like that. AI inherits the assumptions and limitations of its developers and its users. So if those creators, you mentioned HR, or now have users who are in this next generation and don't represent a broad spectrum of lived experiences, we will end up accelerating inequality and inaccuracy in the name of what we like to think is what's happening around us, which is innovation. But you have to be thinking about the other eyes, inequality and inaccuracy.
Right, right. So it's really a matter of ensuring across the board there's diversity, not just in tech.
Exactly. Across the board, the people that are using it too, because there can be bias that goes into that. You brought up HR, right? People that are looking at resumes through, ChatGPT and AI and saying, pull out the most critical components and the best candidates out of this slew of resumes. We've got to take this seriously. And, I think AI is great. I think this is an unlock for, society. And I think it's also going to require people, to program it in a way that's not going to include bias. Yeah. And I think it's going to also include people learning how to use it in a responsible manner.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. It's funny you mentioned, I love that you zoned in again on HR, because just a few days ago, I'm not sure if you saw it, there was in the news, I think a man who's in his 40s or in his 50s, and he sued Workday for bias because he realized that there's something systemically wrong when he literally met everything in the job description. Everything on his resume was perfect. And he wasn't being cocky about it. He's like, literally, there was no reason why he should be at least not going to interview stage. And after sending tons of applications, he realized there's a problem here. He's hired now, but he realized that there's something wrong with the ATS, the software system that scans resumes. And so now he's suing Workday. And so it's just amazing that, wow, AI could be trained to have bias, and that could affect thousands, potentially millions of people in the future if it doesn't stop now.
I did see that.
I think your sound is going out. Sorry. Say that again. Yeah, I can. Go ahead.
I said I did see that story. And there's a broader point in what you're describing. I think, I have to put my education hat on. education has long been the front line of economic mobility, okay? And so if colleges and universities do not prioritize AI education and do not prioritize fairness in how they design and deliver and scale AI education, they're not just failing the students that are learning from them, they're failing the workforce. And we need to reimagine the value proposition of higher education. It's not just a degree or credential anymore. It's an engine for growth and continuous learning and adaptability. And I think regulators, employers, and educators, because we talked about, different groups, all have a role to play here. It's funny because I'm like, Elise, you're bringing up a problem. It's like, how are you going to solve it? Like, I don't society at large, but I could do my part in the role that I have because I have influence, right? At DeVry, we've taken this very seriously. We've built AI coursework. We've embedded it across disciplines. We've seen a 29% increase in AI course completion in the last year, which is good, right? Like, we're doubling down here because we want people to know how to use it. So they're in front of a hiring manager and they're showing that they have the skills necessary to, on day one, interact with this type of technology and support the organization's mission.
Wow, that's awesome. I think my final question for you would be, thinking about the next generation of women, like we always like to be future focused, right? So think about the next generation of women, like Gen Alpha, right? Who are eventually going to grow up to be women. And they want to lead in tech or in education or even directly in AI. And even talking to Gen Zers who are still on their leadership journey. What would be your unfiltered advice for making that happen, making their mark and kind of achieving similar to what you've achieved, even though the system isn't fully built for them yet?
I love giving advice to the next generation of women because I think that's one of the ways I give back and feel really good about being in the role that I'm in, even though I'm, one of few in C-suite roles right now. Look, here's the truth, and I'll be candid. No day is perfect, and there's always going to be pressure. I feel like I'll use a running analogy. I'm running with a weighted vest often, right? Like being a leader and leading in tech has its, there will be weight on your shoulders. Here's the truth, right? If you're waiting for the system to be fair, to be equitable, or even fully functional, you'll be waiting a very long time.
Wow. Yeah.
You absolutely cannot build a career if you're simply waiting for a signal or permission to, to enter that room or walk through that door. You are going to build it by navigating environments strategically and refusing to internalize what you perceive as limitations that others are either projecting onto you or that you're projecting onto yourself.
Yes.
I say bloom where you're planted all the time, and when you do, people tend to notice. I think I brought that up in our last conversation.
My mom uses that phrase a lot. She says, prosper where you're planted, Rachel. And that's exactly how I ended up where I am now.
Exactly. And look at you, you're super successful. And people follow you and they learn from you. And so my unfiltered advice is this: understand the system, but don't be defined by it. Study the dynamics, know where the doors are, and which ones you'll have to build yourself. And then I'd also say, get fluent. If you want to lead in today's AI-driven workforce, you've got to be comfortable with change. You've got to lean into emerging tech. And you need to understand that transformation is now expected, no matter where you work. And that includes AI, data automation, systems thinking. I can go on. In the third, we talk about technology, but you and I are having a really dynamic conversation, and that's because we possess durable skills, right? So invest in those, the ones machines and AI cannot replicate, because I'll tell you, as a hiring manager myself, I am going to look for your tech skills, but I'm also going to look for critical thinking, communication. Can you navigate ambiguity? Can you work in situations where there may be chaos or you might not have complete or perfect information.
Right.
So yeah, I think those three, and I think perhaps even the most important that I didn't bring up is know your worth before someone else tries to discount it.
Wow. Oh yeah, that's so important. Very important. Especially because a lot of women get faced with, I'll do this for us for publicity, for visibility, and there's actually no real value in it. But then their male counterparts don't get that. So I totally agree 100% with you on that. You know what, Elise, this has been an awesome interview. It's been great having you. I'm sure I'll have you back again at some point in the future.
I would love to be back. Thank you, Rachel.
And so you take care. Enjoy are you training today, running?
I'm not, but tomorrow I have a 4 on the 4th, so a 4-mile run on the 4th, and then I train on Saturday.
Cool. Well, oh yes, 4th of July, of course. Yes. Well,
Yes.
enjoy. All right then. Well, for those of you who are listening, if you are feeling a little bit anxious about the future of work and AI, do feel free to tune into this podcast. It comes out every Monday at 5 a.m. across all podcast streaming platforms. We're talking Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, you name it. Don't forget to rate the podcast. Don't forget to leave a review, comment, and also share with your coworkers and your friends and family, and let them know the future of work is right here on Work 2.0. I'll see you in the next episode.